What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Did the Dbacks make the right free agent decision, choosing Eduardo Rodriguez over Sonny Gray? How did the Dbacks' potential starting lineup look on Monday? And did Ryne Nelson leapfrog Tommy Henry in the battle for the number 5 starter?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Miller Thomas. The Dbacks on Monday played another spring training game, and in that one, we got to see Ryne Nelson. He looked pretty good once again. Has he overtaken Tommy Henry in the battle for the number 5 starter? We also got to see the potential Dbacks opening day starting lineup, so we'll talk about how that lineup looked on Monday. And then there has been a little discussion. Sonny Gray recently said that when he was talking to free agent teams, the Dbacks were one of those teams that he had on his offseason wish list. So we'll discuss if the Dbacks made the right choice to go with Eduardo Rodriguez over the Cy Young runner-up in Sonny Gray. So we'll talk about all that on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are slowly approaching 1,000 subscribers. Want to hit that mark before opening day, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast and talk about the game on Monday against the Oakland A's. The Dbacks lost 6-5 against Oakland. They are now 7-11 this spring training. I'm not trying to take too much into the record, but again, it would be nice to see the Dbacks win some of these spring training games, especially beat the ones against the teams like the Oakland A's, right? In that game on Monday, we get to see the battle for the number 5 starter continue as Ryne Nelson took the mound on Monday. He started the game and he had himself a solid, but not like an elite outing, but a very good outing, and an outing that was better than some of the other recent competitors in that battle, right? The Tommy Henrys of the world has been struggling recently. The Slades of the world have been struggling recently. So for Ryne Nelson on Monday, 3.2 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 2 strikeouts, did look solid. Gave up a solo home run, but for the most part, I think, again, with these pitchers, not every time you're just going out there and trying to pitch the best version of yourself. Sometimes you're trying to work on things. And Ryne Nelson in this start threw 66 pitches, 43 for strikes, but most importantly, he was working on different things in this outing, and I think it was all for the positive because we know Ryne Nelson is the guy that wants to be fastball dependent, wants to throw that fastball as many times as possible. It's his go-to pitch, but you can't just throw the fastball. That's been his issue in the past. Ryne Nelson will throw the fastball 75% of the time, but it makes you just too predictable. And if your secondary pitches are not plus pitches, it just makes your fastball that much more vulnerable. So this offseason, he's been working more on throwing that slider harder. He's working more on his changeup, and we got to see it in this outing. That slider, he actually, for once, wasn't trying to throw it as hard. In the past, this spring training, Ryne Nelson trying to increase the velocity on that slider. In this outing against the A's, he wanted to take a different approach to that pitch. He wanted to work on more horizontal movement, so he altered his grip on the pitch, and now maybe it's not coming out as hard, but it's coming out with a little bit more spin on it. Looks like a different kind of pitch almost. So for Ryne Nelson, I like the fact that he is working on things, getting a little bit more movement going with that slider. He also threw the changeup more in this outing. 9 times on that changeup he threw. I think he got 3 whiffs with it. So it's like Ryne Nelson is working on himself as a pitcher. Even had a couple of curveballs thrown as well. So it's like when you're looking at this competition, you do like the fact that Ryne Nelson is someone that has been in your building since 2022. He came up as a certain archetype, 2-pitch guy, fastball dependent, and now a couple seasons later, you're starting to see his arsenal develop, his stuff develop. And just the way he's attacking hitters is starting to develop as well. He's changing his mindset. He's working on his pitches. So if you're the front office and the managers for the D-backs, you have to like the fact that he is improving every day as a pitcher, and maybe because of that development that you've gotten to witness from day one as a rookie till now, maybe you think that development is going to further progress as we go into the regular season, and maybe you think if you make him your number 5 starter, he just continues to get better throughout the season, and maybe even supplements. That's not the right word. Maybe he does eventually replace. I'll just say the easiest word off the top of my head. Maybe he does eventually replace Brandon Pfaadt as the number 4 starter in the rotation. I think that's probably still a little too far-fetched. That's still probably too far down the line to even consider, but I like the fact that he is a guy that has been working on his stuff every day since he's gotten called up to the big leagues. The fact that he continues to develop and get better, I think should make an impression on this D-backs front office and managers. I think they will take a good hard look at that as we enter the regular season, because it is neck and neck with him and Tommy Henry. And I do have to wonder, are we just one outing away from Tommy Henry officially taking the backseat to Ryne Nelson in this competition? Because Ryne Nelson has been, I wouldn't say heating up recently, but he just been, every outing is either good to great. He hasn't really had any bad outings. Tommy Henry, 8 earned runs over his last 2 outings. He seems to be slipping. He seems to be going in the wrong direction. And again, Tommy Henry is coming off that injury. So maybe you think part of the fact as to why Tommy Henry has been a little bit more up and down is because maybe there's some arm fatigue there, some arm soreness. I'm not entirely too sure. That's me speculating, but maybe he's not as ready for the regular season coming off the injury as opposed to a Ryne Nelson who was on the postseason roster. Like, one of the reasons why I think I kind of like Ryne Nelson entering this regular season, because he did kind of show me in that World Series, in that bullpen game. He only had 1 outing in the World Series, but in that 1 outing, 5.1 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts, and I honestly thought you could have said it was Ryne Nelson's best outing of the season. It actually made me pretty excited for what he could be in 2024. That's how I felt in the moment watching that outing. I was like, Ryne Nelson kind of showing something today. So I actually don't mind at all if Ryne Nelson got the opportunity to be the number 5 starter over Tommy Henry. Coming into spring training, it was definitely Tommy Henry in the lead over Ryne Nelson, but I think that could be changing as we get closer to the regular season, because again, Tommy Henry's starting to struggle while Ryne Nelson continues to put in the work, continues to put in pretty good results, and continues to develop those pitches. So I like to see which direction the D-backs are going to lean in this number 5 starter, but I think it's neck and neck right now, and I wouldn't even be surprised if Ryne Nelson at this point was the 1A with Tommy Henry 1B in the battle for that number 5 starter. And just a couple of more notes from the pitching in Monday's game. Miguel Castro, I just had to bring him up because I'm just so unenthused and unexcited for what he's going to do for the D-backs this upcoming season. 2 more earned runs on Monday against the Oakland A's. And if you look at his game log this spring training, every outing except for his first outing, he has given up an earned run. Miguel Castro now has a 12.46 ERA this spring training. He has been absolutely horrendous, and I can already see in the first month of the season, D-backs have a lead. They're up 1 run or 2 runs entering the 7th inning. You give the ball to Miguel Castro, and he blows it for the D-backs. I could see the D-backs losing 2 or 3 games in the first month because of a Miguel Castro. And if that's the case, I don't think he will be on this roster very long. Hopefully, he's not even on the roster entering the regular season, because I just don't think he's going to help out the D-backs this upcoming season. I think eventually he will find his way off the roster, as we get closer to playoff time. And then on a positive note, Paul Sewald, Ryan Thompson, Kevin Ginkel all came in this game, all had scoreless outings. That trio looks ready for prime time. Ryne Nelson as your 7th, Ginkel as your 8th, Paul Sewald as your 9th. Sign me up. If the Dbacks ever have a lead going to the 7th, I think, unlike many years in the past, we could actually say, you know what? This game might be over. Now, we'll talk about the Dbacks lineup that debuted on Monday because it might be their opening day lineup. So we'll talk about how it fared against the Oakland A's. But if you want to catch some Dbacks games on TV this season, one of the best places to do that is Amazon Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to the date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Don't forget, if you like the show, please follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. As I'm sitting here, Monday, March 11th, 7:20 p.m., I just had a podcast idea because every time I check and look over at my phone, I get another Twitter notification because the NFL free agency is buzzing, and I just need to know if I need to do another topic this week on how boring the MLB free agency is, because somehow the reigning Cy Young Award winner in Blake Snell is still out there. World Series pitcher Jordan Montgomery is still out there. The MLB free agency took forever to get going. The winter meetings were boring. It's been a slow trickle throughout the whole season. The whole offseason, I should say. The Shohei Ohtani signing did not start an avalanche of moves. It's been a very boring offseason. The NFL free agency, after just one day, I think is way more fun than anything that happened this MLB free agency. And mostly it's because MLB free agency is so scattered apart. I actually think it's better when we have all these cluster moves. Like NFL free agency, most of the excitement is going to be done after this week, and that's okay, because now think of all those Locked On NFL podcasts. They can now start talking about what their team is going to look like next season after just a week of free agency. Imagine if we could do that in baseball. Like, I want to do prediction pods and this and that and talk about previews for this upcoming season, but it's hard to expand it to the NL West and the West and the rest of the National League because teams are still making moves. A team like the Marlins might go out there and get JD Martinez. A team like the Giants, they just signed Matt Chapman. If they go out there and sign Blake Snell, like all of a sudden they're going to be a playoff contender. So it's hard to do some of these predictions with Major League Baseball, despite us being 2.5 weeks out the regular season, because our offseason somehow still hasn't concluded. Meanwhile, sports like the NFL and the NBA have their off seasons done essentially like a week into free agency. So hopefully the same can happen for Major League Baseball eventually, because I just hate the way MLB free agency has gone the last few years, because it's gone just so slow and it just been too spaced out. So hopefully Major League Baseball and the commissioner can come up with some kind of way. I think there has been discussions to make free agency a little bit more fun and go check out the crossover Ben Caspick and I did. Ben Caspick of Locked On Giants and I did a few. It was a couple months ago in the offseason. We had some ideas of how to make free agency more interesting. So go check out that podcast. Now that my tangent is over, let's talk about the D-backs lineup that debuted on Monday, because this is potentially the lineup that we're going to see on opening day. This is what it could look like against a right-handed starting pitcher. And let me go through the lineup for you. If the D-backs win against a righty, this is how the lineup will most likely shake up. Corbin Carroll as your leadoff, Marte as your 2, Gabriel Moreno as your 3, Christian Walker as your 4, Jock Peterson as your 5, Lourdes Gurriel as your 6, Eugenio Suarez as your 7, Alek Thomas as your 8, Geraldo Perdomo as your 9. Man, that looks like a deep lineup. Like we've said a lot on this podcast, I think this is one of the deepest lineups that we've ever seen the D-backs put on the field before. Like, seriously, Eugenio Suarez, a guy that hit 49 home runs back in 2019, guy that hit 30-plus home runs in 2021 and 2022, is going to be your number 7 hitter. Geraldo Perdomo, again, not the best player, is an all-star, just batting 9th. Alek Thomas was a top prospect, and his greatest skill was considered his contact hitting ability. We haven't seen it yet on the major league level, but if he's ever able to figure out that bat, man, this D-backs lineup is going to be even deeper once the regular season comes around. I think this offense is going to be able to score a lot of runs. Like we've talked about, you're still going to have all that speed from last year. Corbin Carroll's going to be there. Marte's an above-average runner. Moreno, Walker, above-average runners. Perdomo, 16 stolen bases last year. Thomas, top 30 in sprint speed, I want to say, in Major League Baseball. So most of the players in your lineup are either above average or they are speedsters like a Thomas or a Carroll. And now that you added a little bit more power in your lineup as well, with the Eugenio Suarez's, with the Jock Petersons, Grichuk is going to hit a few bombs. Maybe Corbin Carroll takes the leap as a power hitter. Maybe Gabriel Moreno takes a little bit of leap as a power hitter. I just think this D-backs lineup is perfectly balanced. From the speed to the power, I think they're going to be able to manufacture runs. I think they're going to be able to score runs with one swing of the bat. I'm really excited for this D-backs offense this upcoming season. I think it could be one of the best offenses that we've ever seen in D-backs franchise history. But you wouldn't know that from Monday's game because the D-backs offense did nothing. They scored 1 run through the first 8 innings of this game, so their starters did nothing. The only starters who were hits in this game was Corbin Carroll and Geraldo Perdomo. So the offense, at least from their first game, wasn't that impressive, but I'll be a little bit more concerned once we get into the regular season if they still score just 1 run through 8 innings. The most intriguing thing that we saw from this lineup was Gabriel Moreno batting third, because the biggest question we had for the lineup entering the regular season was who is going to be batting third for the D-backs. We've had conversations of should be Moreno, should be Lourdes Gurriel, should be Jock Peterson, should just be Christian Walker, should be Ketel Marte. Like, there's so many different guys on this D-backs team that you can make that argument for. It always felt like Carroll and Marte were locked into that 1 and 2. It always felt like Christian Walker was going to be your number 4. So the question was, who is going to be that number 3? Moreno, Lourdes Gurriel, Jock Peterson. And from what we saw from Monday's game, Gabriel Moreno might get the first crack at being the number 3 hitter for the D-backs this upcoming season. And it's not that big of a surprise. Moreno did get bumped to number 3 in the lineup in Game 3 of the NLCS after not batting there the entire season. Like, that was the most impressive thing, and one of those decisions that Torey made that maybe you questioned a little bit at the time, but you go back and just such a smart move by Torey and a bold move by Torey, because like I said, Moreno had not done that the whole regular season. It was the first time he batted third at all, was that Game 3 in the NLCS, and it ended up working out big time because Moreno was huge in that series, and specifically from games 3 to game 7, Moreno collected 7 hits. And so that move worked out phenomenally for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And so I think Moreno could be a guy that is an intriguing option to be your number 3 hitter this upcoming season. He still needs to improve in the power department, but when you think about the strengths of a Moreno, he's an above average runner, especially for his position. High hitting tool. We know he's going to probably have a pretty good batting average, pretty good with the contact, like high contact ability. High hitting tool has always been his biggest strength. Like, he's going to be a guy that bats around 290 probably for the majority of his career. And despite not having a ton of power, he was someone that was pretty good at driving in runs last year. So if he can continue to drive in runs next season, continue to be an above average runner, and continue to just be a good hitter, I think he can work out as the number 3 hitter for the D-backs. His hard contact stats are above average. His K rate was below 20% last year. In the second half of the season, he had a 313 average and an 894 OPS. And to be honest, if you just look month by month for Gabriel Moreno, June was the only month where he struggled. Like, he was pretty good the entire season, actually. If you look at his numbers, like in April, Moreno, 301 average, 709 OPS. May, 279 average, 697 OPS. So he was solid those first couple months. June fell off a cliff. 190 average, 480 OPS. And then, like I said, second half numbers, absolutely phenomenal for Gabriel Moreno. 313 average, 894 OPS in the second half. So really, outside of June, Moreno played like an all-star last year. So if you can get that Moreno, non-June Moreno, I think this is a guy that could be really good for you as your number 3 hitter. Over 800 OPS with runners in scoring position. Still someone on the upward trajectory of his career. Still someone that should be getting better. So if Moreno does take steps forward in his development, does get better in those offensive areas that we discussed, a little bit more power, get on base just a little bit more. If he improves in those offensive areas, he could be incoming to a monster offensive season and being the number 3 hitter for the D-backs. We could be seeing a breakout season coming for Gabriel Moreno that could potentially move him into the top 5 among all catchers in Major League Baseball. Now I want to talk to you guys about E-Rod versus Sonny Gray. Did the D-backs make the right decision when it came to free agent pitchers? But before we get into that conversation, I first want to talk to my D-backs listeners about this new sponsor called Prize Picks, because football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss the D-backs' decision to choose Eduardo Rodriguez over Sonny Gray, because Sonny Gray, I think, recently went on a podcast saying his offseason wish list when looking at teams, the D-backs were one of those teams that he was eyeing entering the offseason. And I want to discuss if the D-backs made the right choice to go with Eduardo Rodriguez over the Cy Young runner-up, Sonny Gray, who signed for a 3-year, $75 million deal with the St. Louis Cardinals, because, to be honest, I believe the E-Rod deal is better than the Sonny Gray deal, and here are 4 reasons why. 1, E-Rod is younger. 2, E-Rod is cheaper. 3, E-Rod is just as good. And 4, E-Rod is a better fit. Number 1, E-Rod is younger. Very easy one to break down. Birth certificate. E-Rod is 30. Sonny Gray, 34. When looking at those two numbers, I assume 34 in terms of age is still higher than 30 in terms of age, right? 34 still bigger number than 30. Because of that, as an athlete, I'm always going to gravitate toward the younger guy, especially when you look at pitchers. Typically, paying pitchers over the age of 30 is not good business. Now, The D-backs did just do that with an Erod, but the reason why I think it's okay with an Erod as opposed to a Sonny Gray, and not just because Sonny Gray is a few years older, Gray also has 500 innings pitched more on his arm than an Erod. And Erod also is someone, when you look at his career, he has dealt with a lot of injuries. He also missed the 2020 season, wanted to opt out. So when you consider the injuries throughout his career and the 2020 shortened season, like Erod does not have a ton of mileage on that arm, has only pitched over 160 innings in a season just once back in 2019. So this is someone whose arm should be way fresher than a typical guy who's 30 because he just doesn't ever pitch a full season. And because of that, I don't think there's as much wear and tear on Erod's arm as compared to a Sonny Gray, who maybe doesn't have the biggest seasons either in terms of inning pitch, but he's definitely done a lot more than an Erod has. I mean, this past season, Sonny Gray, 184 innings pitched. 2019, 175 innings pitched. Back in 2014, 2015, over 200 innings pitched. So Sonny Gray definitely has way more wear and tear on his arm than an Erod. Erod, cheaper than Sonny Gray, is getting $5 million less annually. So again, let's just play the number game. 20 million versus 25 million. Which number is bigger? I'm assuming the 25 million. I'm assuming that doesn't change when you're talking about money. I'm assuming that doesn't change when you talk about age. Erod, his average WAR over 162 games is 3.1. Sonny Gray's is 3.7. So you're paying $5 million more for a guy who's like only a half win better. I'm not sure if that's really good business. So I approve the D-backs going with not just the younger guy, but also the cheaper guy. And like I mentioned, Erod is also just as good. When we look at career ERA, Sonny Gray definitely has it over Erod. Gray's like at a 3.47. Erod just barely above 4 at like a 4.03. But again, because of injuries, I think Erod could be a guy that had an ERA probably in like that 3.8 range. But I think he's never been able to pitch a full season. I think at times he has had good starts, but he had to be pulled early due to injury, which also hurts your ERA. Like, I think there's a bunch of factors to Erod's ERA as to why it's not as low as it probably should be for a guy making $20 million a year. So even though Gray's ERA is better than Erod's, I do think Erod's ERA is probably overinflated because of the injuries he's had to deal with throughout his career. Because you look at some of the advanced stats for some of these guys, home run rate, walk rate, K rate, all nearly identical between Erod and Sonny Gray. Erod also allows less hard contact. So really, when you look at some of the advanced stats, really, really close between an Erod and Sonny Gray. I will say Sonny Gray, probably the better pitcher. I just don't think it's leaps and bounds. That's why I said Erod is just as good. Gray is definitely better, but I don't think he's that much better than an Erod. I think he's, I think Sonny Gray's the number 2. I think Erod's probably a low-end number 2, high-end number 3, and I think that's probably just fine. And then finally, Erod just a better fit with the D-backs. Sonny Gray, a really good pitcher, would have been a welcomed addition as the number 3 starter for the D-backs, but Erod as a lefty starter, I think just makes more sense in a rotation that's righty-heavy. Gallen, Kelly, Brandon Pfaadt, all right-handed pitchers. Depending on if Ryne Nelson wins the number 5 starter job, that's 4 righties in your rotation. I think adding Erod, a lefty, just helps balance out the rotation so much more. And if you look at the guys under Erod who got contracts this offseason, like, I like Erod better than any of them. Like, you could really make the argument Erod was the best value of any pitcher this offseason. Of all starting pitchers, Giolito got $19.2 million per year for the next 2 years. He just underwent elbow surgery. I think he's done for the season. Stroman, he's getting 18.5 for the next 2 years, 18.5 annually for the next 2 years. He's not as good as Erod. He looked really cooked at the end of last season. I don't mind Michael Wacha at 16 a year over the next 2 years, but is there a reason no one wants to keep him around? Frankie Montes has 16 per year. Like, I don't think Montes is very good. Seth Lugo at 15 a year for the next 3. Like, Seth Lugo's like a back-end rotation, long reliever type. Like, Erod at $20 million, I think, is a pretty good value. $5 million less than Sonny Gray. Like, Again, I think Erod is arguably the best value of any pitcher this offseason. I think it was a very smart move by the D-backs. Again, Gray might be better than an Eduardo Rodriguez, but considering Gray's age, his contract value, and Erod's fit with the D-backs, I would rather have Erod on his 4-year, $80 million deal than Sonny Gray on his 3-year, $75 million contract. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.